All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 137, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And yeah, we do have some really big news and really big releases today, so let's get cracking, I guess. As usual, the first section of the week is getting started. We got 3 pretty good articles here today, starting with TypeScript. Stop using any, there's a type for that. An article that essentially deep dives, I guess, into what the any keyword is, how does it work, and what are the better ways of typing the stuff like this. The author argues that basically any is not helpful when writing your own code, and it only should be used when using the third-party libraries. And I kind of agree with that, right? So if you're going to use TypeScript and going to type your code as any, what's the point of using TypeScript, right? So I totally get why you would use any when you use third-party library and you want to just, don't want to spend too much time typing whatever they have there because they didn't have types. Using any makes perfect sense. But when you write your own code in TypeScript and use any within the code base, like what's the point? Then why use TypeScript in the first place? This is one of the reasons, by the way, why I kind of am a bit wary, I guess, of the TypeScript. But anyway, it is a pretty good write-up. So if you are curious about the any keyword, and if you're curious about when you should or should not be using it within TypeScript, do check this article out. Next one we got here is dead code elimination in JavaScript. This is a deep dive into dead code elimination, specifically targeting the Webpack and some of its plugins. Basically shows how it uses the specific plugins like the env variable definitions within the Webpack builds to eliminate the dead code within the specific files. So it just goes basically step by step, shows you what the Webpack does, how it thinks, how the plugins work. So if you are unfamiliar with the dead code elimination, if you are wondering how exactly do those things work, then this is a pretty good starting point. Again, not super in depth, so if you already know the basics, you won't really find anything amazingly new here, let's just put it this way. And the last getting started article we got here is actually a handful. Like this was not easy to digest. It's titled Dissecting a Dweet number 9 City Sunset. I think we already had a couple of those in the previous BxJS Weeklies, and essentially dives into this 140 symbol demo that draws a city procedurally, right? And it dissects it line by line, symbol by okay, there's no lines, but symbol by symbol essentially on what exactly is happening here, which is, just as the previous were, absolutely fascinating read. It's amazing what people can do in 140 characters, all right? So let's just put it this way. So if you're curious, how do you put this kind of procedurally generated city in just 140 characters, including the sky and everything, do have a look at this article. It does a really good job of explaining what's happening, what exactly is the mathematics behind that, and how does it use canvas in tricky and smart ways to draw this kind of city skyline kind of thing. Yeah, more impressive is there is actually now a 3D version of the city, again fitting in 140 characters, which is it's just insane what people do. So if that sounds interesting, absolutely do check this one out. It's a really great write-up. Okay, continuing, we got articles and news. We got 3 of them here today, starting with Svelte for sites, React for apps. So as article from Mr. Swix, who is talking, or I guess comparing the different frameworks, in this specific case Svelte and React, but I think that extends way beyond just those two, and talking about the advantages and disadvantages of each of those in terms of building websites and building the web apps. I think I did a pretty similar comparison during the last stream of Web Components when someone asked me, like, what do you think about React versus Svelte? Right, and I do agree with Sean on quite a lot of points here. Hey Johnny Mnemonic, welcome to the stream. Hey Aaron, welcome to the stream. Going pretty good. Hope you're going as well. Hope you are doing well as well. That's too hard to say. Anyway, back to the article. I think, yeah, as I said, I already discussed this briefly during the Web Component stream when someone just randomly asked me a question, but I think I completely agree with this notion that it's really hard to replace something like React when you're really building an application, right? So if you're building a small website that has some limited dynamic functionality, if there is, if you expect the smaller pages with some limited buttons, inputs, whatever, forms, something like Svelte would work amazingly well, right? But if you're building a really big, really complex app that has a ton of different moving parts, needs support for different technologies, like the, I don't know, what do you call it? I'm forgetting the names. What do you call it? When you dynamically fetch the code later, there's a proper name for that. Dynamic imports is what I'm trying to say. There you go. So if you need something like, dynamic imports of the whole components and you need to wait for them, you need like concurrent mode and all that kind of fancy stuff that, well, in normal cases, you don't actually need any of that, right? So if you're building something very simple and very straightforward, code splitting, yes, that's also another thing. Like, yeah, code splitting, dynamic imports, that's more or less the same, like close-ish on... Code splitting is the bundling tech, and then dynamic imports is what you do in the browser, right? So it's related. But yeah, so if you are not building something as large, why am I so bad at speaking today? So unless you're building something as large and as complex as, say, Discord, right? So this is, it's a web app, and it has a lot of moving parts. Like even if you just open it in a browser, it looks very nice. It feels almost like native app. It performs very nicely, and it has a ton of different widgets, components, whatever, and they all interact with different data. Building something like this with Svelte, probably possible, but probably also not going to be as easy because there's a lot of dynamic bits, and you also need, okay, so dynamic bits maybe not as, a strong of argument here, I guess. But in my opinion, the biggest thing is, first of all, they are tailored for very specific things, right? So Svelte was tailored for building very lightweight, very fast, very nice dynamic websites and pages, because the guy behind Svelte, Rich Harris, he is, I think, still working on the, what was it? I believe Guardian, as one of the sort of the data science-y people who do the fancy visualizations for them, right? And he needed a tool to quickly mock up this or build those pages and ship them with some interactivity, right? And for this case, Svelte works amazingly. Like, it's really nice framework. There's a bit of a learning curve. But on the other hand, the ecosystem is really small, right? So it's like, you can see that it was built specifically for this because there's not that many tools that actually allow you to build rich interactive apps. React, on the other hand, while it is, yes, it is larger, it is more complex, and there's like a lot more learning curve to it, it does have an incredibly large ecosystem that has components for basically just about anything you can imagine at this point. Like, even video games, I can build video games with React. I mean, you can build video games with Svelte as well, I'm sure, but it's going to be a lot harder to make something that is super interactive. That's kind of the point, right? And yeah, like there's a lot more arguments here on, what is the difference? Why does he think that Svelte fits websites more than React, and why React fits web apps more? So if you're curious, do absolutely give it a read. Let me know what you think, guys. Is this a fair comparison? Do you really think that, this is a good way of putting it? Let me put it this way. So Svelte for sites, React for apps, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe Sean is wrong as well, and maybe there is a different way of looking at it. I'll be curious to know what you guys think. Hey Nitsan, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, we got an article from Adios Money that is titled Faster Web App Delivery with our PRPL. That is quite an acronym that stands for, well, it's actually just the first letters of 4 sentences, not just like words, but actually 4 sentences. So it stands for push all resources required for initial route, render initial route, pre-cache resources for additional routes, and then lazy load on demand as user requests them. Pretty tricky approach that was, I think, originally made by the people behind Polymer, which were looking into how you can actually speed up the web components and separate loading of separate ES modules and making them faster. And this is what they came out, but the approach seems to be relatively universal and can be used in most of the frameworks and applications. So if you are basically, if you care about the performance of your app and if you are looking for different ways to tackle it, then do check this one out. It's a really good write-up and will probably make your app quite a bit faster. All right. Last article we got here today is how we built Chrome DevTools WebAuthn tab. So this is a deep dive into the new fancy WebAuthn DevTools tab that allows you to tweak essentially web authenticator, or I guess mock the fake web authenticators in your browser if you don't have one physically or just want to test something, with a pretty extensive write-up on how they did it, what was put into the backend, into the UI, what kind of things they needed to address. It's like, I personally love stuff like this. It's always very interesting to read about, you know, the caveats, shortcomings, and things you have to keep in mind when building something seemingly as simple as, you know, mocking a web authenticator in a web browser. It's like, sounds straightforward, right? But there's actually like about, I don't know, 5 pages of text here explaining what the hell went into that, which is really great. So if that's a topic that interests you, absolutely do read through that. It is great. Right, that's actually it for articles and news. We are coming to the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness, but before we continue, let's have a look at the chat. How does WebAuth play with OAuth? Will it eventually replace OAuth? I mean, the idea is that WebAuth, Web Authentication API allows you to access, among other things, a bunch. So for example, like right now, if you are using hardware authenticator, like the key or whatever, right? You usually have to have some sort of a local software that will specifically talk to the server. And then the server, like the app that you're using, has to implement their own support for that, which is, it works, but it's annoying and not straightforward, right? So Web Authentication API will essentially consolidate it all into a browser so that when you plug in your USB authentication stick, the browser will automatically detect it, and the web app can just talk to your authentication hardware directly without needing any third-party servers or whatever, right? So this is kind of the gist of it. The cool thing is that it's not limited to the hardware, and you can actually just provide your private key, for example, right? And your so private public key approach obviously works. And will it replace OAuth? That's a hard question, like where? So you can obviously just log in with your private key anywhere on the web, so long as the web authentication is supported. But I don't think it's going to replace it anytime soon, basically. So someone needs to manage your private key anyway, right? You have to store it safely, back it up, and then somehow synchronize it across devices, which means you have to use some service anyway, which, again, depending on the use case, is probably going to be just like, hey, why don't I just log in with Google or Facebook or whatever, right? So I don't think it's going to replace it, but it's definitely a very nice API to have. And as someone who tried to look into how do you actually implement access to the hardware auth tokens from the browser, this is a very welcome addition. Hey Gregorish, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, as I said, we got tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. We do have quite a few things here, starting with Async cookie storage API, the new cookie storage API coming. So it's already available in Chrome version 87, which I believe is the beta branch right now. But so gist is, we're finally getting a bloody normal cookie API. So you can just say cookie store gets cookie name or cookie store set cookie name and manipulate the cookies without having to parse the whole damn string and then, you know, split it, join it back, which was just annoying. I am amazed it took how many, like 10 years since JavaScript exploded in like 2010, basically, right? To add a proper bloody cookie API to the browsers. I guess it's not critical because we had like a nice libraries that essentially did the whole splitting joining, but it's super nice to finally have a proper spec and proper API that does it for you. So there you go. Quite excited about this. Probably will land in the browsers, like in stable versions in the next couple of months. So looking forward to that. Okay. Next big announcement, this one is super exciting, is Edge WebView 2, Microsoft Edge WebView 2 is now generally available, meaning that all your apps that you are building for Windows are now going to be using Microsoft Edge WebView 2, meaning that if you are, for example, shipping the Progressive Web App into the Microsoft Store, your progressive web app will now use the latest Edge, which is absolutely fantastic. Same goes for any Win32 C++ apps. They are still rolling out the .NET and WinUI stuff, I believe, so it's coming there. Still gonna take time, I guess, to add that, which is a bit of a shame. So it's not like universally supported yet, but still, this is super awesome. So, you know, now, like, I don't think there's ever been better time to publish your app as a progressive web app into the Microsoft Store, especially considering how easy it is. And yeah, now it just uses Edge. So it's like, I would be very curious to see where the Electron ends up with the moves like this from the, you know, vendor sides, and whether or not, what do you call it? Linux or macOS would do something similar. I guess like macOS is not extremely interested in the web field in general. Safari is still lagging behind in standard support quite significantly in comparison to, well, Chromium, I guess, right? But yeah, this is really great. I absolutely love to see that. Okay, continuing, we got Meet Face ID and Touch ID for the web. So this is one of the advantages, again, of having Web Authentication API. Essentially, Apple used the Web Authentication API to expose the access to Face ID and Touch ID from the iOS devices, or macOS devices, actually, because some of the latest MacBooks have the Touch ID, I believe. Yes, now you can just use your Face ID or Touch ID right in the browser with simple WebAuth and API, and the usage is actually super straightforward. Like, this is a lot easier to use than I expected it to be, honestly, which is kind of cool. So we probably should do a stream on that at some point and see how exactly we can set up the public-private key authentication and maybe some other form of oath, maybe the Face ID from my iPhone or something like that. We'll be curious to see how exactly it works out. The article itself is actually really big and has like a full-on tutorial here showing how you can use that. So if you are curious, do check this one out. Okay. Next announcement we got here is yet another one from Microsoft. The Microsoft Edge, the Chromium new one, is now available for Linux. So you can actually grab a preview build. For now it's just the dev channel, so not even close to being stable, although from my experience of trying it out, the dev channel used to be relatively stable, like a lot better than Chrome dev channel, actually. Yeah, if you want to try Microsoft Edge on Linux, you can now grab it and just use it. The cool thing is that they actually shipped the Microsoft Edge Linux driver, which means that you can now not only use the Edge itself as a browser, but you can actually control it from Linux, which is super awesome. So, you know, this is quite exciting. Hey, Ahoy, I guess? Is that how you read your username, man? Ahoy, welcome to the stream. Hope I'm reading that correctly. Maybe not. If not, correct me. Okay, last tiny thing we got here for today is the MDN Web Docs editorial strategy and community participation. So we finally got some sort of a roadmap from the MDN folks on how exactly the MDN is going to continue working, because as you know, the Mozilla essentially fired all the writers that were working, or I guess all the people in general that were working on MDN, and there's just basically up to the team that is remaining there right now to figure out what to do with it, which I don't envy their position right now. But essentially the gist is that they are gonna refresh the tooling for the MDN. They're gonna build some sort of a new platform, and they're going to have the wiki-like approach where the community is going to be contributing and maintaining most of the content. Yeah, it's like Mozilla's been doing so much strange things lately. I honestly don't know how this will end up. I'm, you know, wishing all the best to the team, because they obviously want to see this continue developing. I mean, MDN is an incredible resource, and it will be very sad if it's at some point just, you know, dies. But I wonder if there will be enough people willing to contribute essentially to keep it up to date and to keep this, you know, the same incredible quality that they had when they actually had a like full-on writing team working on that. Don't think that's going to happen, but who knows? We'll see how that develops, basically. Okay, that's it for the tips, tricks, and besides awesomeness. We are coming to the releases now. We do have 4 of them, and 3 of them are really, really large. Starting with Node.js version 15. So we finally got the new version of Node. This also means that Node 14 is now LTS. Okay, not yet, but it's going to be LTS in a few weeks, basically. At least by end of October is their plan, I believe. Which means you should be migrating to it right now. Node 15 is not going to go to LTS, so if you are planning to use it in production, make sure to remember that. And, you basically will be forced to migrate to Node 16 in, 4 months, I think. So basically mid-2021. And Node 15 comes with support for abort controller and promises. New and API if you work with that. NPM 7, which is, by the way, absolutely mind-blowingly great. Like, the speed of this thing is just really awesome. And there's also the experimental support for Quick Protocol, which is awesome. The node now completely throws on unhandled rejections, no longer warnings, it just basically crashes and dies. And we get the V8 version 8.6, which is really awesome. So there's like a bunch of new features and a bunch of improvements. Primarily some WebAssembly related stuff that is super great. So there you go. Really cool. Love that Node team moves so fast. Yeah, I mean, the speed of development of Node is amazing. It's like really, really cool. I'm quite excited to see how what basically the future holds, because so far, the Node looks like this very established enterprise technology that is now just slowly expanding in some features and then just improving performance, which is perfectly fine. But, I'm kind of curious if that's what it will be in the long run. And then something like Deno or whatever other projects will basically try to innovate and base off something of the ES modules, for example, because let's be honest, ES modules support in Node.js, yes, it is there. 14 is actually have it, and a lot more projects start to use it, but it's probably going to take like 5 more years for all the Node projects and NPM projects to switch to ES modules. Maybe not 5, maybe 2, 3, but still, it's like a long way off. And we're going to see how that develops, basically. Anyway, continuing, we got Firefox version 82. Fortunately, nothing really super exciting here. So probably the web renderer that is rolling out for more users on Windows is the only super exciting thing. Again, I'm kind of curious to see how the Firefox will end up in the next year, I guess. They did get quite a bit of money from the Google, right? Again, because they're setting them as a default search engine. But that's basically it. And all of their other business ventures essentially failed. And then they're fired half of the team. And I don't know, it's like it just doesn't look really good, to be honest. And it's very sad. Like, I would want to have... I still use Firefox as a browser sometimes because it just has some very nice features like containers, for example. But yeah, let's just see how that develops. Anyway, continuing, we got React version 17 is finally here. This is a version, as we already talked, it doesn't have any new features at all. So it's more or less the same as the React 16, but it does have some breaking changes that basically lead up to the subsequent versions that will have concurrent mode and all the other things. So shouldn't be too hard to upgrade. There are some minor changes, but again, just make sure to run your tests, make sure everything builds, everything works as expected. And it's like not the most exciting release, but for me it is exciting because it leads up to the, the subsequent stuff like suspense for data, concurrent mode, and all that kind of stuff that has been promised to us basically for 2 years now, I think. And the fast release is basically also now fully supported, right? And works in most frameworks, I believe, by this date. So there we go. Let me have a look at the chat. For us to move to ES modules on Node, we might need the migration tool with a Babel, with a transform like Babel. The problem is that it's actually really relatively easy to migrate your own code base to ES modules, right? So this is not a problem. There is even TypeScript, the VS Code, for example, can transform almost the whole code base for you to ES modules. The problem is once you transform to ES modules, other packages have to work as ES modules, or you have to tweak around common modules, which might not work at all in that environment. I don't know if they fixed that, but I tried like building a project from scratch using ES modules a couple of times. And every time I encountered basically some existing library that just straight up didn't work in ES module setup. So this was kind of the biggest pain point. It's the same problem as TypeScript. If you're using TypeScript with modules that don't have TypeScript definitions, you're going to have problems, right? And I guess there's some way to solve it, but I'm just not willing to fight it because it's just too much trouble, basically. And I'm guessing that all the production environments will be the same. It's like people are not going to be willing to spend hours upon hours just fighting environments to use ES modules. Well, yeah, they are nicer than CommonJS, but it's not killer feature, right? Hey Mantaputra, welcome to the stream. Hey Narzantaria, welcome to the stream. Let me have a look at the chat. Can you say some tool for download some data as Excel files and Node Express? I mean, downloading, just fetch it, like use request.js or whatever, or Axiom or, stuff like this. This is Obi, like Chai. No, Chai is a testing framework, right? It's not really a download tool. Or like the assert, what was it? Assert framework, I think. Chai, that's probably Chai.js. Yes. It's yes, assertion library. So there you go. That's not really gonna work. There's no way to shim it. Like there is a way to shim it. There is a way to make sure that CommonJS packages work with ES modules. The problem is that it requires you to spend time, and like if you are building a production app, you're not gonna dedicate like a week to fix all your modules just to use ES modules, because why? Your CommonJS works fine, so why care? Like this is my basically main point in that. And unless all the modules work seamlessly with ES modules, I don't think anyone's gonna like completely use them and migrate to them, which again, as I said, is gonna happen at some point. It's probably gonna take a few years. You can R to scrape the data and then save it as CSV. Yes, R works amazingly well for data scraping, so that's an option, but that means you have to use a different language. Every new thing will break your existing workflow. Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of the point. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really love ES modules. They are really, really cool. But man, the effort that they require right now to actually use them is, well, okay. If you're starting a new project, try it. Maybe it will work out for you. If you have an existing one, you are likely not gonna want to do this, basically. Rocking the beard. No, rocking the beard. Yes, yes, Absis. Thank you, man. I'm trying to figure out how to properly, trim it and make it look nice. But as you can see, I'm not very good at that right now. Still getting the hang of it. Okay, continuing, we got another release, Create React App version 4. So there's another major release here that ships the React 17. Fast refresh, TypeScript 4, ESLint 7, Jest 26, and a bunch of other cool things out of the box. So there is a migration pass. It is not super hard, but not extremely straightforward either. They are dropping the Node 8 support, so if you're still for whatever reason on Node 8, make sure to migrate from it. I mean, it's reached end of life a year ago at this point, basically, so you shouldn't be using it anyway. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see the new version. So if you're using Create React App, make sure to update. There's a ton of new cool things here. And that's basically it for releases. Now we are coming to the libs and demos. We don't really have that many of them here today. But the first one we have is turtleDB. This is in-browser database with offline for offline first use cases, and it's basically built on top of IndexedDB. If you ever try to work with IndexedDB directly, you know how painful it is. This thing actually has a very nice API. So, if you're looking for something that wraps around IndexedDB and provides you a human API, let's put it this way, this seems like a very nice project. So do check this one out. Okay, next thing we got here is wasmbin. Self-generating WebAssembly parser and serializer written in Rust from the Google Chrome Labs team, specifically Mr. Error Reverser, who does some incredible things. Again, this is a purely Rust module, but if you are working with WebAssembly, this might be incredibly helpful. And if you are, want to dive more into Rust and wanted to learn it, I think one of the features that he advertised on Twitter was that it basically is almost completely written based on Rust macros, which is mind-blowingly crazy for me. Like I still not very good with Rust, but so anyway, this thing exists. Basically, do check it out. Have you done a stream on WebAssembly? I mean, we did a stream where we did the Golang to WebAssembly. We did a stream where we did the Rust to WebAssembly, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. I don't remember. Like, I did some of them, but not, it wasn't super in-depth and was very, very... like the use cases were boring basically. So if you have some fancy use cases, we can try to do that. It's just the problem that I just don't have any good use cases for this. Anyway, continuing, we got Spaghetti Audio, Web Audio and Canvas experimentation. Yeah, this thing is more like a demo. There was a link somewhere. Where's the... How is it not? Wait a second. There was a link. Anyway, this thing basically allows you to draw strings on canvas, and then after you draw them, you can move your mouse around and trigger sounds based on the string length, which results in some hilarious stuff. There's a GIF that shows off how it works. I am 99% sure there was a live demo of that somewhere. For whatever reason, the GitHub doesn't include a link to it, but you probably can find it. It's a pretty fun one, and again, the source code is quite nice to dive into and see how it was built. Okay. Next thing we got here is markdown-wasm, a markdown parser and HTML generator implemented in WebAssembly based on MD4C. This is a C version of markdown parser and generator. Essentially, this is MD4C compiled down to WebAssembly. The performance of this thing is just mind-blowing. So it's like it just blows everything else out of the water in terms of performance within the, Node.js, JavaScript, or whatever you prefer. Like throughput, ops per second, all that stuff is just bonkers. So yes, if you were looking for an incredibly fast markdown parser, you can check this out. And yeah, that's like the source code is here. All the stuff is here, tests are here, examples are here, super easy to use. Again, I'm not exactly sure why you would want a parser with 50 megabyte throughput, but 50 megabyte per second throughput. But yeah, that's that exists, and this is one of the, I guess, testaments to the incredible speed and performance of the WebAssembly. So there you go. Okay, continuing, we got fcal, the extensive math expression evaluator library for JavaScript and Node. Exactly what it says, basically allows you to evaluate just about any form of mathematical expressions and calculate the results out of them, which is, yeah, looks very nice. Like, I honestly don't know why I personally would need that. I probably don't have any projects related to something like that. But if you are building something related to evaluating user written mathematical equations, then this actually looks really, really damn cool. Right, and the last thing we got here is FSHistory. This is, again, another crazy WebAssembly thing. So this is 4 flight simulators, Flight Simulator 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one of them is from like 1982 to 1989. Completely running in your browser in a way, they took them, compiled them to WebAssembly, and just, yeah. This is Flight Sim running in a browser using WebAssembly. And you can play it. And yes, it actually works relatively well. And there's like 3D camera and everything. And that brings back some memories. I don't think I ever played the first one, second one, or third one, but I do remember playing the fourth one and being absolutely terrible at it and basically just destroying myself on every possible occasion. But yes. If you want to, you can now just play Flight Sim 4 in a browser and see most of the features actually work amazingly well, and you get this pretty damn good 60 FPS right here. So code is also open source, so if you're curious as to how it was built, you can check this one out. Okay, last thing we got here is bongo.cat. This is not a library, not a demo, or I guess it's a demo technically, but it's a bongo.cat, and you can play bongos, you can play a bunch of other things, and it's, you can just sit here and press on bongos all the day basically, and it's open source, so if you want to check out how bongo.cat was made, you can. That's basically all I have for today, guys. So if you have any questions, suggestions, or things you want to share, your projects maybe, now is the time to throw them into the chat. Meanwhile, if you want to go ahead and look through the links, as usual, you can find them on GitHub or on bxjs.dev. You can join our Discord server to talk about any of that when there is no stream. You can follow me on Twitter for JavaScript retweets or my hot takes on video gaming and JavaScript. I think that's about it. So, yeah, doesn't seem like we have any more questions or suggestions. So, thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support as always. And I guess I see you on Wednesday for the next dev stream. Maybe we'll do one earlier. So I'm gonna have a look. Gonna have a look at my schedule. Maybe we're gonna have a bit more streams starting next week, but not completely sure yet. Let me have a look at the chat. Can you take a look at Mr. Velik footballers, please? What is that? Whoa. And make a recommendation on how I can improve the code. Yes, please post. So please just reach out to me in the Discord. Let's do it there because I want to do it on stream essentially. Okay. Anyway, hope you guys had a nice time. That is terrible. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much for watching. Have an awesome rest of the weekend, on awesome rest of the week, and I see you next.